Hello everyone, my name is Colleen Tripp and I'm an associate professor of English. I am here to give both a speculative presentation where I'm thinking through this moment, right, that we are in, but also to give some material concrete approaches to pedagogy. It's actually been interesting to see everyone's approach, just the prompt itself, right, to apply to the showcase. So the agenda today for my presentation is, first I wanted to talk about the public discourse of AI in writing, right? What is everyone saying? Why do we care? And how can we sort of negotiate the different rhetorics that we're seeing? Then I wanted to move to some possible practices that could be helpful in terms of teaching writing, in terms of, living through, if we want to call it, the era of generative AI. Some say open AI, which then stands in for generative AI. And then finally, I wanted to give a kind of material, concrete idea of pedagogy. So thinking through the essay as a portfolio. And of course, I'm thinking not only a portfolio in terms of revisions, but a number of feedback exercises, activities, annotations on the essay itself that kind of document the writing process. And this is partially due to thinking about learning is not simply about outcomes, but also the development process, right? Okay, so this is kind of tongue-in-cheek, but clearly from the images you see, there's a kind of a moral panic discourse, right, about LLMs. That is very common in the history of technology. This occurred when the calculator came out, right, thinking about the calculator as an educational technology. So we have a tweet that's remarking on the idea that 15% of their papers were AI generated. Interestingly enough, we actually don't know on the spectrum of human-computer generation what that is. Is that 100%? Is that sort of a curated 30 to 70%? Something like that. We have another tweet, which I think is really interesting, is thinking through AI is a pedagogy crisis, not a plagiarism one, right? I think that's something that is on everyone's minds. And then, of course, this is a kind of popular article that came out that I saw a lot of people talking about. The college essay is dead, right? So in short, we're thinking about the writing product, right, in terms of also a process and how they relate to one another. Maybe they don't. So the discourse, right? So I told you I'm interested in popular culture. So, of course, I'm kind of interested in the sort of ways in which people are speaking about this. So we have this kind of polarizing rhetoric, right? On one end of the spectrum, we're thinking about the ways in which there's a kind of uncritical celebration of LLMs. Thinking about kind of the ways in which that overpromises the kind of possibilities of LLMs, but also kind of denies the idea that there are very real environmental, copyright, equity issues involved, specifically thinking about the fact that LLMs are knowledge generators. I think Mauro, actually both, have been speaking up about this idea as LLMs as being knowledge generators. They really are, right? People go to them. It's sort of like going to Wikipedia in some ways, where you go up, you can ask about a topic, it generates a narrative, right? So you can think about the ways in which the training data sets, in fact, influence the knowledge that is then produced. Some sources say that it's global. I would say it's more transatlantic. So then you have this idea of homogenizing world or national narratives, right? So that's very real. Then we also, though, have the kind of protectionist stance, right, where a denial of LLMs. So this is thinking about the ways in which we have kind of a bottlenecking of media literacy. And the issue with that is that it basically obviously maintains a certain kind of status quo. That also then means students don't have a kind of literacy that could be used, could be part of their future, right? Because you want to start thinking about, let's be realistic and validate what students are experiencing now and what their future could look like. And so again, I'm going back to the calculator. I like this example. Thinking about your philosophy as a teacher, right? Are you teaching simply basic skills, or are you also teaching basic skills with the use of certain tools, like a calculator? I really doubt that there's a number of classes that don't use calculators, right? So I think thinking about your stance or philosophy as an educator and what that means, I think, is important. Okay, so This is sort of, when I said speculative, I wasn't joking. So these are some of the many questions I've been asking myself and thinking about LLM use in writing, right? So actually this is kind of a typo. This is imprecise. Not excessive LLMs, because you can actually use LLMs excessively and it would be fine. And unethical would be the better way. So is there a relationship, for example, between unethical LLM use and perhaps student imposter syndrome, right? Is it that students are unethical plagiarists, or is it that they feel as though they can't produce something as worthy as an LLM, right? I already had mentioned validating what students are experiencing right now in the world they could inherit. I've also asked, what is this kind of rigid attachment to pedagogy? I think it's important for folks to self-reflect if there is a kind of rigid attachment and why that you're feeling that way, right? Even thinking about the pleasures of creative authorial voice, right? Why do we want to be better than robots? I mean, I'm serious. We should be thinking about that. Finally, thinking about, are more students disengaged because of LLMs, or is it that it's just more obvious now? And maybe that's uncomfortable, right? So instead of thinking whether or not we should use LLMs, maybe thinking about the fact how and why we teach with educational technology, your philosophy as an educator, and also the significant relationship between information, power, and media literacy in general, right? Okay, this is like kind of the fun quote until the next segment. The robots are already here, and more are coming, and by and large, it will not be folks with training in writing and rhetoric studies who create or use them. But we can perhaps be among those who influence both how they work and how they are incorporated into the writing practices of people's institutions. I think we definitely should be. Okay, so this is how I sort of got started on thinking about this. So essentially, when I was creating some curriculum, actually, Amanda was helping me. I don't even know where Amanda is. I said to Amanda specifically, before I'd even done research for this, Amanda, I need models. Oh, there you are. I'm talking about whatever. I said, Amanda, I need models. There is a genre to creating curriculum, and I need to know how to identify it. And this comes from literally years of me working as an encoder, where I'm breaking down structures of a text. So basically, you're using XML to help computers process books and texts. XML is a language that describes another language. So I was breaking down books by the paragraph, the sentence, the noun, the introduction. There's actually a lot of analysis when it comes to encoding. So anyway, so that's how I learn, right? I don't know if I don't know how that came. It was my personal experience. This has to do with, I guess, post-process theories of learning. Anyway, so LLMs generate new data based on learning past language patterns and following kind of what meanings usually follow from prior meanings, right? But humans actually, studies have shown, have a clear advantage in terms of speed and creativity in applied knowledge. So a small child can see someone drop something 3 times, pick it up, and they will learn within those 3 instances that they need to do that and follow that behavior. LLMs need roughly 50,000 times more training instances than the average human child to produce the same behavior. A really good example of this is how LLMs actually struggle to master genres in real time. So actually, genres are interesting because texts are always introducing new elements. That's why actually genres by default really are heterogeneous, they are dynamic, they're open-ended. That's what's great about genres. That's why we all want to argue and talk about genres. It's so fun. I mean, I think it is. So with this in mind, I borrowed some of the pedagogical approaches, or I was really inspired by, I guess I should say that, really inspired by actually approaches that are from teachers of writing that are involved with second language learners. And so these like kind of group of educators are really interested in models, processes, and genres, right? And so of course, we're thinking about large language models. We can see this. And part of this is that relational response theory that I had just mentioned before. That's when you learn from patterns. So what I'm seeing sort of in public education or public discussions of writing is really this idea of including more nested activities. Our keynote Anna Mills is actually doing an annotation project that I just saw. I literally saw it 2 days ago, so I don't know the name. But I have been noticing that's really sort of a lot of activities, pedagogically speaking, that I'm seeing that are popular to kind of integrate LLMs. And it's interesting, right? Because of course, using LLMs to call forth sentences, styles, paragraphs, whole text products to then use in conjunction, scaffolded with a kind of slow implementation with the writing process is really where we need to start going, or I think it is, at least from what I'm seeing. So, how much time do I have? Okay. So this is sort of the MPG approach, right? That's the kind of the shorthand term. Models, so write models of different texts, but also sentences, paragraphs, processes. So obviously I'm thinking of post-process pedagogy here. That's obviously what's more accepted and sort of talked about now. And that's thinking about kind of a number of steps that a learner needs for kind of creating concrete habits and skills that lead to those results, right? And then finally thinking about genres, right? The history of communication genres as a cultural phenomenon and a kind of aesthetic experience for us. So I even give examples, right? So this is some of the ways in which we can incorporate LLM use. So thinking about, for example, models. You can ask to basically machine generate opening paragraphs, or I guess whole stories, and then compare that with the opening paragraph of something, some other kind of human generated text. So I said the award-winning story, The Paper Menagerie by Ken Liu. This has actually won multiple awards. So then you can ask students which of these opening paragraphs is strongest and why. Right? So then they can really see through models the differences, or maybe similarities. Processes, you can have your students generate a list of themes and motifs, and then obviously have an LLM generate that and sort of do a compare and contrast to get ready for theses or thesis statements. For genres, I like this, mechanically generate a list of genre conventions and then have your students actually fill that out and supplement that with essentially quotes, symbols, scenes, and maybe other conventions, right, of a story that you're studying. So, this is sort of, again, and I am pitching for a literature class, so my apologies for those that are in, the sciences or maths. So this is imagining a kind of final essay as a portfolio of scaffolded exercises, annotations that really showcase students' workflow, right? Thinking about documenting different stages. We're exploring them. And so, of course, we're talking about moving away from static AI generation and moving towards kind of a thoughtful curation and the sort of use of LLMs as a support tool. So I give more examples. Planning, so idea generation and brainstorming. Drafting, so the generation of themes and motifs. Abstracts, like feedback. And I believe in feedback, by the way, in multiple. I believe in that sort of tenet of revision as creation. It's not something that's just done after. In fact, going back to Amanda, I don't know where you are. I had Amanda, she was giving me feedback on that curriculum throughout the thing, and I said, Amanda, I need feedback. So feedback in the drafting, and then in the sort of revising phase, obviously feedback once again. And I think what would be interesting to get peer instructor feedback is to have students do presentations or podcasts, right? Have podcasts where they're actually in conversation about the text, talking about whatever the argument is. And then, so the portfolio could look like this. In the end, they would obviously submit an essay, but it would in fact be a portfolio. And the essay itself could have footnotes with annotations. And those annotations could be rich in terms of, the possibilities of what it is. So thinking about having them answer questions like, why did you structure your paper this way and why? The students could talk about the emotions felt while writing, right? I mean, I think a lot of students will tell you that writing an essay is not comfortable, right? I would actually say it's not comfortable for a lot of people. I feel uncomfortable when writing, in my everyday job. You could have moments where the students using these kind of annotations will detail feedback that they received from LLMs and if that changed or helped their paper. You could also, of course, then have justification of AI use and explanation of why. And part of this is because this is like my dorky moment right now. I really like footnotes. I really think that it enriches student writing. I've always loved footnotes. I really have. And I think it's one of these interesting paratexts where footnotes make explicit what is implicit. Right? And that's more, and it can be more than simply secondary sources. Part of footnotes is that it's introducing unseen writing processes, at least in this example. And this is, I can't take credit for this. I have a works cited at the end of this, you'll see this. But footnotes are arguably rudimentary low-tech hyperlinks that connect diverse information through intertextuality and provide readers with a textual experience characterized by divergence and non-linearity. And I think that's true. And so I think creating those footnotes or annotations would really kind of enrich the experience of writing, but also for the reader as well. So in conclusion, we talked today just about some speculative thinking about LLMs and the writing product, but I wanted to think through how we could maybe start revising the writing product and sort of highlighting the writing process, and the essay as a portfolio kind of aims to replicate that journey and to kind of ensure assessment in a way that I think an output like an essay can't really in sort of our current times. So I have this is an example of the kind of thing I'm talking about when I say I like footnotes. I'm not joking about this, or even comments. So this is just, I was a public humanities incubation mentor, and these are sort of, I was giving them like a how-to guide kind of. And so this is me. I have an entirely different narrative going on in the margin. This is for a colleague where they were trying to figure out, how do I write an abstract? So I started to break it down into components for them because that's how I see text. I see them in components, and it varies, right? Just like a genre is flexible and it's open-ended and changes. But and then I have, so there's thank you, but I have a very long works cited. So this is one thing I thought was interesting I didn't mention. Thinking about how discourse in the public about LLMs is often shaped by those who fund it. And I think that's really important. And there's been studies now out about that. But anyway, you can all look at the long thing later. All right, thank you.